The rain came down in sheets that November evening, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected neon and forgotten dreams. I stood under the awning of a closed bodega, watching a figure huddled against the brick wall across the street, a woman, maybe 60, maybe older, wrapped in layers that had long ago stopped providing warmth. She wasn't asking for anything, wasn't holding a sign. She was just there, invisible to the hundreds of people rushing past with their umbrellas and their phones and their certainty that they were headed somewhere important. I was one of them until that moment. Until I really saw her. That's when everything changed. Not in some dramatic lightning strike way, but in the quiet recognition that shakes you from the inside out, the kind that whispers you can't unsee this. You can't walk away and pretend you didn't notice, because I had noticed. And in that noticing, something cracked open in my chest that I didn't even know had been sealed shut. Her name was Margaret. I wouldn't learn that until later, after I crossed that rain-soaked street with a hot coffee I'd bought from the corner shop that was just closing, after I asked if she needed anything, and she looked at me with eyes that held more stories than I could imagine, more pain than I wanted to acknowledge, and said simply, "Just someone to see me." Those 5 words rewrote my understanding of everything. I was 32 years old, working 80-hour weeks at a marketing firm, climbing a ladder I wasn't sure led anywhere I actually wanted to go. My apartment was in a nice building. My car was leased but looked expensive. My life was constructed from all the right pieces, arranged in all the acceptable ways, and yet I felt hollow, successful and hollow, like I was winning at a game whose rules I'd never questioned. Margaret didn't ask me for money that night. She asked me to sit with her for a minute if I didn't mind the rain. So I sat, and she told me about her daughter, about the nursing degree she'd earned 40 years ago, about the husband she'd lost to cancer and the medical bills that had swallowed her savings. She told me about the moment she realized she'd lost her apartment, how she'd sat on the floor of that empty place and felt like she'd disappeared from the world entirely. "The hardest part isn't being cold or hungry," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "It's being invisible. It's watching people look right through you like you're already a ghost." I went home that night and couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop seeing her face, couldn't stop hearing that word, invisible. Because wasn't that what I'd been making people my entire life? Wasn't that what I'd become myself, in a different way? A perfectly groomed ghost in expensive clothes, moving through a world I never really touched. The next day I went back. I brought soup this time, and a warm blanket I'd grabbed from Target. Margaret was in the same spot, and when she saw me, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or hope, or the painful uncertainty of someone who'd learned not to expect kindness. "You came back," she said. I came back. We talked for an hour, then 2 hours. She told me about the shelter she sometimes stayed at, how it was full most nights, and you had to line up by 3 in the afternoon to have a chance at a bed. She told me about the other people she'd met on the streets, about Robert, who used to be a teacher, and Lucy, who'd aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. She spoke about them with such tenderness, such fierce protection, that I realized she'd built a family out of the broken pieces the world had discarded. I started visiting Margaret every day after work. My colleagues thought I was crazy. "You can't save everyone," my boss said, in that tone people use when they're really saying you shouldn't try to save anyone. But I wasn't trying to save Margaret. I was trying to see her, and in seeing her, I was learning to see myself. 3 weeks in, I met Robert and Lucy. They gathered with Margaret in a small park during the day, sharing what little they had, a sandwich split 4 ways, stories traded like currency, laughter that seemed impossible given their circumstances. They welcomed me without suspicion. This stranger in her business, clothes who'd wandered into their world like an alien visiting from a planet of plenty. Lucy was 19 and reminded me of my sister. She had that same quick smile, that same habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. She'd been on her own since she turned 18, when the state decided she was no longer their responsibility. No family, no savings, no safety net. Just a high school diploma and a world that expected her to figure it out alone. "I used to think I was the only one," Lucy told me one afternoon, her voice small. "But there's so many of us. Kids who age out and just fall through the cracks. Nobody teaches you how to rent an apartment, or open a bank account, or even who to call when you need help. You just wake up one day and you're supposed to be an adult. Except you're really just a scared kid with nowhere to go. I thought about my own daughter. Safe at home with my ex-husband. Worried about her algebra test and whether she'd make the soccer team. I thought about how different her life was from Lucy's. Not because of anything either of them had done, but because of a cosmic lottery of circumstance they'd had no control over. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I called my ex-husband and talked to Emma. Really talked to her for the first time in months. I told her I loved her. I told her she mattered. I told her about Margaret and Lucy and Robert, and how sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply see the people right in front of us. Can we help them, Mom? Emma asked, her voice eager in that way children have before the world teaches them cynicism. Yes, I said. Yes, we can. The next week, I brought Emma to meet Margaret. I'd cleared it first, made sure Margaret was comfortable with it, and when they met, something beautiful happened. Emma sat down on the park bench next to this woman who society had rendered invisible, and she asked Margaret about her life. Not in that pitying way, but with genuine curiosity. She listened. She saw. And Margaret, this woman who'd told me she felt like a ghost, came alive. She showed Emma pictures she kept in a plastic bag, photos of her daughter's graduation, her wedding, her grandchildren she hadn't seen in 5 years. She told stories that made Emma laugh and cry. And I watched my daughter learn the most important lesson I could ever teach her, that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And kindness costs nothing but means everything. Emma came home and emptied her piggy bank. $347 she'd been saving for a new phone. We need to help Miss Margaret, she said. And before I could tell her she didn't have to give everything, she added, you said we can help. So let's really help. That money became a seed. I matched it, then doubled it. I reached out to friends, posted on social media, shared Margaret's story, and Lucy's story, and Robert's story. I expected maybe a few $100s, enough to get them through the winter. I was wrong. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of dollars poured in from strangers who'd also felt that same crack in their chest, that same recognition that we're all more connected than we pretend to be. People donated clothing, offered job leads, volunteered time. A local landlord, moved by the stories, offered reduced rent apartments. A community college administrator set up a scholarship fund for young people aging out of foster care. But the most important thing wasn't the money or the apartments or the scholarships, as critical as those were. The most important thing was that Margaret and Lucy and Robert became visible. Their stories mattered. They mattered. 6 months later, Margaret had an apartment. Small but hers, with a kitchen where she could make tea in the morning and a door she could lock at night. Lucy enrolled in community college, studying social work because she wanted to help other kids like her. Robert started volunteering at a literacy program, his teaching skills finally recognized and valued again. And me? I quit my job at the marketing firm. I started working with a nonprofit that helps people experiencing homelessness. Using all those skills, I developed selling products nobody needed to instead tell stories that actually mattered. I make less money now. My apartment is smaller. My car is older. I've never been happier because I'm no longer invisible to myself. Because I learned that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth. It's connection. Because Margaret taught me that being seen is a fundamental human need, as essential as food or shelter or warmth. Last week, Margaret invited me over for dinner. Her apartment was filled with people. Lucy, Robert, others I'd met over the months, and Emma, who'd become a regular volunteer at the shelter. We crowded around Margaret's small table, sharing a meal she'd prepared with such pride. And I looked around at these faces that had become family. I want to make a toast, Margaret said, raising her mug of tea. To being seen, to being known, to remembering that we're all in this together, even when the world tries to convince us otherwise. We raised our cups. This unlikely family built from kindness and circumstance, and the simple revolutionary act of paying attention. And in that moment, I understood that this was what I'd been searching for all along, not success or status or any of the empty achievements I'd been chasing. Just this connection, this profound and ordinary grace of seeing and being seen. Her name was Margaret, and she saved my life by letting me see hers.